Hi, everyone, and thank you for joining another one of our PropTech live webinars. Today, we are so happy to have the Durst Organization. It's an organization that's been around over 100 years, and the conversation is all about investing in the long term of innovation. We will have multi-generational firms, and we will hear from top people, David Neal, Daniel Farber, and Lucas Hoyt that will host this great session. And here we will have Lucas starting and presenting himself, and we will go in deep dive to the conversation.
Great, thank you, Avia. Welcome everyone, thank you for being here today. My name is Lucas Hewitt, I'll be serving as the moderator, and very pleased to have David and Daniel with us today. We're gonna do some brief introductions and then get into a discussion around a number of these topics, and then go into a Q&A for everyone that can submit questions, and we'll have that at the end of the session. A little bit of my background: I've been in commercial real estate for nearly 20 years. And during this time, I've been focused really at the intersection of property, hospitality, and technology. I work with HLC Equity's brand Layers, which is a full-service property management company for multifamily assets across the country. What sets Layers apart and makes us interesting is that we operate serviced apartment programs right alongside conventional multifamily units, generating higher risk-adjusted returns for our owners. So Daniel, I'll hand it over to you to do your introduction.
Sure. Hi there, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon to those who are overseas and not on the US time zone. I'm Daniel Farber from HLC Equity. HLC Equity is a multi-generational real estate investment company. We have gone through lots of different cycles and iterations, and from retail neighborhood shopping centers to today, what we do in the multifamily space with our operations and our investment platform, HLC Direct, and our brand Layers. And I had I was lucky enough to meet with David Neal. Now it's going over a year, so a little bit over a year ago, and we had great conversations in terms of what their firm is doing and has done for decades, and what our firm does, and we've always just had great conversations around that, and also on a personal side. So I was really excited that we were actually supposed to do this live, and unfortunately that's not the circumstance right now. Hopefully we will get there, but I was excited that we were able to put this together and to hear from David and the background from the Durst organization and how they're viewing things today. So just excited to have David. So thank you very much, David, and thanks everybody for joining.
Thank you. David, a little bit of background on you and the organization?
Sure. So my name is David Neal. I'm a principal with the Durst Organization. We develop, own, and manage real estate in the United States. We've got 15.5 million square feet of real estate, 13 million of which is commercial. The bulk of the 13 million is in 11 skyscrapers in New York City, One World Trade Center, One Bryant Park, and formerly known as 4 Times Square, but 151 West 42nd Street are examples of the 11. Our skyscrapers are clustered downtown and in Midtown on the east side, on Corporate Row, Bryant Park area, and over in the Grand Central corridor on 3rd Avenue. We also have about 2,000, just over 2,000 residential rental units in the portfolio. About 10 to 15 years ago, we ventured into residential as well. In our over 105-year history, we were commercial focused, but more recently have expanded into residential. We were also historically a very New York City, actually a very Manhattan-centric company, but we've expanded initially into Queens. I know for most folks on this on the call or on the presentation, Manhattan to Queens is not very far. For us, it's the equivalent of going from, I suppose, Manhattan to Israel. So that was a big change for us. Since our philosophy passed down from the prior generations was that the mandate was to always be able to walk to all of our properties. I suppose we still can walk to our properties. It's just an awfully long walk. Most recently, we've also expanded into Philadelphia.
Wow.
It's a pleasure to be with everyone. I just want to give a quick shout out to Daniel, to Lucas, to everyone on the team, Avia, and to Laura. I think it's great what Daniel's doing to convene this group, and just honored to be part of the conversation. So thank you to Daniel and everyone on your team.
Excellent. Well, thank you for being here, both of you. David, let's kick these things off with you. We're going to have, again, I mentioned a section at the end for questions from the audience. So if you would go down to the Q&A at the bottom of this webinar, you can submit the questions anytime, and I'll grab those at the end. We also had some questions that were submitted ahead of time, so appreciate those that submitted those. First question to you, David. The Durst Organization, as you mentioned, over 100 years old. And I know that over this period of time, you've been focused on innovation, but also on concepts like sustainability and community. I wonder if you'd share a little bit about kind of your current priorities of the Durst Organization, given that historical legacy.
Yeah, so great question. All of those are our priorities. Our priorities have not shifted, right? So innovation is a core value, a core corporate value of the company. Sustainability as well. There was a great saying that's been passed along from generation to generation of "leave this place better than you found it," and that is something that all 1,300 employees take very seriously. It's being environmental stewards, and sustainability is something that personally I'm very committed to, but it's also really the ethos. It's really part of the environment here and the culture here. So green building, as many of you may know, we were really at the forefront and helped actually bring about the green building movement, at least in the United States, if not, triggered it, elsewhere as well, but certainly in the United States and in New York City, at the forefront of green building. A number of our properties, actually, a lot of our innovations predated LEED and inspired LEED in the United States. But we've got a number of interesting innovations, at our buildings that specifically focus on sustainability. And so, to answer your question, the continuity is has always been there and still is there. So innovation, sustainability, continue to be a top priority. Not only because it's something that we all care deeply about, both innovation and sustainability, but it's also necessary to differentiate and be competitive in today's marketplace. Increasingly, tenants, our customers, are rightfully so demanding that we be at the forefront of environmental responsibility and stewardship and innovation. If you don't innovate, you die, right? If you don't innovate, if you're not continuously innovating, you become obsolete. So both are priorities.
Makes sense. I think innovation is going to be one of the call words of the day. I know a number of questions were submitted around that. Daniel, I was thinking about this. HLC Equity has a similar background, multiple decades, multi-generational company. And I'm wondering, I was thinking about decision-making in the here and now and casting a vision for the future. When you have that historical legacy and the institutional knowledge of that history, how does that impact you as a leader for making decisions today and casting that vision into the future? I'm thinking as opposed to companies that may not have the benefit of that kind of institutional knowledge, institutional history.
Sure. Well, it's funny because as we were talking about this, I'm not definitely obvious, the innovation is kind of a key word and it's used, a lot nowadays. And so it's interesting because when we were going through some of our core values, maybe around 2 years ago, and we were discussing kind of, what drives the company, and it was less me, but more, the people who have been on the team for a long time, saying like what actually has driven the company for so many years. So innovation was a word that came about, and that's for sure. But then, I kind of said, hey guys, come on, like, innovation is like, you think of Apple, you think of, these innovative companies that are like totally changing the scene. And it's like, so then somebody said something very interesting. They kind of changed they said, we're not innovative. I think the real word is ingenuity, right? And so like trying to, and that goes back, and I think that it may probably go back to kind of the founders of Durst Organization as well, and also of our founding, which was kind of like frugal and just like making the best out of like limited resources, and just being having ingenuity in terms of what you create. So I think that that's been kind of like a founding pusher for us. Is you have whatever your resources are, and you make the most out of them, and through that obviously comes innovation, and so that then comes new initiatives that that kind of lead the industry, whether it be different stuff that our organization is doing from the service department side, and kind of using digital marketing on certain angles, and Durst and the entire I mean, David can get into it, but with all their actual sustainability initiatives, which are very impressive, and their desire to make better spaces, and some of the things that they do on that end. So I think that it's all semantics, it's words, but I think that it's just kind of, that's how we viewed it, and that's kind of how we viewed that, like our driving force has been ingenuity, which ultimately leads to innovative outcomes.
Makes sense. Well, that innovation, what I think of, there are at least a couple kinds of innovation that we deal with. You've got technological innovation, but then you have business model innovation as well. So I'm wondering, both of you as property owner operators, what do you see property owner operators embracing in either one of those sides of either technological innovation or business model innovation? And are there any examples from your own companies that you'd like to share? So David, maybe back to you.
Yeah, another Lucas, great question. And there's some overlap, of course, between the two, but it's I think an interesting way to think about innovation within the company. So first, in terms of sort of business innovation, really important, right? And difficult to create a culture of innovation, and I think that's what's most important, is to create that culture. Saying innovation, ingenuity, whatever the words are that one wants to use, is important from an aspirational perspective, right? It's important. Rhetoric does matter, but that only gets one so far. How do you really create a culture that is about innovation, ingenuity? And there's a number of ways in which, at least that we have tried to do that. Over the years, a program, for example, I put in place, hard to believe, over 10 years ago now, an innovation program that recognizes and rewards employees for their good ideas. So any idea that benefits the company, that benefits our customer, or that is going to be improving our sustainability practices, we will recognize and financially reward our employees. It's actually a big deal to part of the all hands end of the year ceremony and gathering, where we present the awards and financial incentives for people who come up with the ideas. And there's some great ideas. We've actually recognized over 51 innovations over the last decade. This last year, there were a couple of really interesting ones, some of which were tech, by the way. So again, here's where you have the blurring of the lines. One idea that comes to mind that was recognized this past year was an idea that was implemented in one of our buildings, and now we're going to replicate throughout the portfolio. And that idea was, given the focus on hygiene at the moment, there was this clever idea of how do we make sure that the soap dispensers, right? There are thousands of soap dispensers in our buildings, right? One of our buildings is over 3 million square feet. And so a lot of effort, a lot of manual effort was going into checking these soap dispensers. And so, a couple of people got together and said, how about we in real time come up with the technology so we can monitor the level of soap in these dispensers? Pretty clever.
Yeah.
And so, that idea was recognized, and that innovation is now going to be replicated throughout the portfolio. So again, that's just one of many examples that I can give. But I think first and foremost, even before you think of technology, I think having a business culture, or as you call it, sort of business innovation, I think is the foundation, and the technology is a subset of, and incredibly important. Certainly throughout the rest of today's conversation, we'll talk more about some of the technological innovations, some more. But I think a corporate culture that encourages innovation is critical.
There's nothing worse than wanting to wash your hands and that soap not being there in the dispenser.
Especially now. Yeah.
Absolutely. Daniel, how about you at HLC?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think that, as real estate operators, we definitely see ourselves as focusing more on the business, the business model innovation as opposed to the technological innovation. But I think that part of the, kind of the catalyst of, being involved with PropTech and PropTech 360 was definitely, creating that bridge and being able to be closely tied to all the technological advances that are coming, because it's kind of, if you can't beat them, you got to join them, right? And so the technology, it's coming into the industry, and in those who embrace it, I think we'll do better. And on the one hand, we have definitely the technological kind of side, and I think that it's important to keep your finger on the pulse, and we can discuss how we're doing that. And then within our own operations, so we have our business model innovation. So the best example of something that we're pushing is our Layers brand right now, in terms of how do we create a hybrid and kind of reviewing everything that was taught to us in terms of the real estate industry, right? So multifamily is multifamily, it's an asset class, but obviously there are areas within other sectors that are coming into multifamily. So whether it's hospitality, which we feel very strongly that there needs to be hospitality in most forms of real estate today. It's implementing that through our service apartment program and so forth. So and that creates a whole new investment thesis also once we're going into investment. So I think kind of like viewing the business model innovation from our standpoint is very important, and then having our finger on the pulse when it comes to what's going on technologically has been important. So the kind of the two main areas is our involvement with the prop tech companies that are coming out. And then we have, technology companies that we partner with for our operations. And then we also through some venture capital funds that are focused solely on prop tech, we're aligning ourselves there so that we can kind of, be on the investment side on that and know what's going on and build strong partnerships with technology companies. But at the same time, it's very important to keep our focus, right? And so our focus is operating real estate to the best that we can.
Makes sense. David, back to you on this, what Daniel just brought up about investments. When today, given everything that's going on from the pandemic to everything else, when you're initiating new investments, what are some of the factors that your investment team are looking at today that maybe they weren't looking at a couple of years ago? How has that changed for them?
Yeah. So I would answer that question in two ways. One is the sort of traditional investment, right? How we think of investment in sort of in the traditional sense, but I would also answer the question firstly with a very liberal sort of definition of investment, right? Investment of our time and effort, sort of more broadly. So first, let me go there and say, again, to this concept of not just innovation within the company amongst the employees, but actually within our buildings, within the properties, right? So, and that includes selecting even tenants, right? The right tenant mix. And so we've put a lot of thought, a lot of effort into, creating these ecosystems, if you will, right? In synergies amongst our tenants, right? We've got 50,000 people that live and work in our properties. a number of our properties. One World Trade Center actually is a great example. The largest TAMI community in New York City in one building is One World Trade Center, right? So you think of tech, right? You think of all the creative types. You want to be in one building, right? In one building with sort of like-minded folks and having that energy. We literally created that atmosphere. We didn't anticipate it, actually. I got to tell you, when we first took on the assignment, I thought it would be more traditional sort of law firms and finance, and it really has turned into something far different. But that took a lot of investment in terms of time and energy. The branding, the narrative matters too, right? The communication matters, the details matter. In certain circles, you come in wearing a tie and, people are just like, oh my God, I mean, literally to that level of detail, it's kind of funny, right? So there are different communities even, right? And different signals that are sent to, try to build up, certain, types of companies within the portfolio. So again, if you think of investment in the broadest sense, a lot of thought has gone into, on our end, to how do we create the right atmosphere within the company that encourages innovation, but also attracting, whether it's vendors, whether it's tenants, right, attracting other stakeholders to be sort of in our orbit, who also share that fire in the belly, right, to constantly push the envelope and innovate and improve things. And we've got a number of examples of even vendors who've become tenants, right, because it's wanted to be close to us, right, and see how the product's working, how it can be improved upon. So in terms of your, the second bucket, right, investment in the traditional sense, strategic investment is how I think of it. We're not a venture capital firm, right? We're not a private equity firm. We do make investments in prop tech, and we have, over the years, where we see a strategic interest, some investment that ultimately we think is going to benefit our core, our core focus and competency of real estate. And that investment can be financial. It can be preferred vendor relationships where we're spending time in giving access to the vendor to information and our feedback, right? Because we want to see the vendor or the innovation thrive, because we think it will ultimately benefit us. We also like to see competition in amongst the vendor community. So we've over the years, tried to spread around, if you will, investments in terms of dollars, but also our time and energy to try to create that sort of vibrant, again, ecosystem that's going to support the real estate community, which is really incredibly important. So again, just broadly speaking, I would just point out, yes, there's no doubt that it's a really exciting time for PropTech. It's a really exciting time, right, for a lot of this technological innovation coming into real estate. But I will just pause to point out that this is not revolutionary, it's evolutionary. Tech in real estate, there's always been a synergy between the two. Think of the elevator, right? Without the elevator, there's no skyscraper. Think of the HVAC systems, right? Think of all these innovations that have happened, not all that long ago, actually, just within the last 100 plus years, right? 150 or so years, that has really enabled the real estate community to thrive. So what you're seeing today is just a building upon that very rich history and foundation.
Makes a lot of sense. And that was actually my follow-up question to you, is the role that technology plays in that. It leads me to the next question that I had. It was one that was submitted, was that we have a lot of technology companies that are in our community and are online today. David, I know that they want to reach out to people like you and to firms like Durst, and they want to build meaningful partnerships, be it a vendor, be it an innovator, if somebody's built a better mousetrap. Could you talk a little bit about the best way for those, innovators to approach you, to reach out to a firm like Durst, to begin those conversations with the goal of actually building a meaningful relationship?
Sure. Look, any friend of Daniel's is a friend of mine. So anyone on the call who wants to reach out, through Lucas, through you, or through Daniel, we'll provide my assistant's contact information and Megan, and happy to start a conversation. But I would say, the sort of advice I would give to anyone who's participating, who's looking to start a conversation with folks on the real estate side. I think it's a couple of things are really important. We're pitched all the time, and a lot of stuff, frankly, is sort of the next shiny object, and not tied to, unfortunately, to trying to solve a problem or seize an opportunity. I think what's incredibly important for any innovation is to, in tech in particular, is first ask the question, what problem am I trying to solve, or what opportunity am I trying to seize? The technology is not an end in of itself, right? It's a means to an end. And so when someone presents a technology, to me at least, that is presented as this is the end all be all, no, right? Technology is trying to solve something, right? It's trying to better our lives in some way, shape, or form, make us more productive at work, or whatever it may be. But the more laser focused one is, and in communicating, right? Communication really important too, right? Communicating in lay terms how the technology is going to move the needle, the better off one will be. So I would start actually with answering those questions, sort of using those questions as a guide, and then starting a dialogue, right? At least I can't speak for other landlords, but for us, and Daniel really alluded to this earlier, it's in our interest to be open to other stakeholders, to be open to new ideas. And so you certainly were a little guarded because a number of us have been burned many times in the past with technology that sounds great that has failed. But that's also part of innovation, right? Is experimentation and failure. As I make the analogy for any baseball fans out there, many years ago I went to Cooperstown, New York, to the Hall of Fame. There's not one hitter who's in the Hall of Fame who batted 1,000. Right, every hitter who's in the Hall of Fame has struck out many times. So I think that, and I think that analogy works for life, right, in general. But the key is, on net, right? There's more hits than misses, right? Especially in key moments. So for us, we're accessible. We try to be accessible, relatively speaking. And we try to be open to new ideas. Again, the key is pitching those ideas in the right way, and then execution. The stuff has got to work.
Makes sense. And when they're approaching you there, and not only are they, solving an addressable problem or seizing an opportunity, how important is it that it ties into you and your portfolio, as opposed to coming in and saying, we've solved a problem for the industry? Is it more important at the beginning of the conversation to start with specifically Durst and to bring it home? Or is it okay to come in and talk about, I'm going to change the world, and then this is how it can be meaningful to you?
Look, always in life, I think, doing one's homework is important, right? And so, our time, a lot of us are pulled in a lot of different directions and do not have a lot of time. And so, no, it's not helpful to hear things about a particular company or technology that may be applicable to, say, a shopping mall when I have no shopping malls. That's right. Great. And, but if someone's reaching out to me to pitch something about all this great success and how the needle's been moved in shopping malls, it's just not for me, right? If someone's reaching out for advice for, hey, do you know anyone who I can speak to who owns shopping malls? That's something that, my assistant or someone else on the team, we give a suggestion or two, and then we move on. So yes, I absolutely, doing one's homework matters, right? The pitch should be tailored to whoever you're pitching to. Why is it relevant? Why is it relevant to me and to our business?
Yeah, Lucas, I actually I have a kind of real-time example of this, and it kind of plays into the responsibility of landlords to help and be a sounding board with a lot of this, with a lot of these things. But I was approached maybe 2 weeks ago by a VC that had a portfolio company that was in the VR AR space, right? So obviously now with COVID, lots of people, it seems like it's this hot space, but the truth of the matter is we've been working on that stuff for a long time in terms of tours and people who can't be on site and being able to view the stuff from far away. But so a tech company came, extremely impressive team, and they kind of sent me the pitch, and I heard it, and it was just like we get pitched these types of services all the time. And so, that was my feedback, is basically like, I don't see anything in here that I haven't heard from, maybe a dozen other companies that have, sent this. And so then, and then they start, the questions became, well, do those companies do this, and do they do that, and do they do this, and do they do that? And, a lot of it becomes in it has to do with the coding and so forth. And I said, and that's at the point where we can say, look, guys, I don't know, I didn't, do a A/B testing on both, but, but we can give feedback in terms of what we're seeing in the market, and if it's likely to fly with a bunch of other landlords, right? Like, are we seeing this stuff all day, or is this something that, really is exciting because it's plug and play, super simple to understand. It's very, very, very easy to just kind of like go in and it'll be valuable, that solves an issue. So I think that sounding board, kind of speaking to what David was speaking of, like share, the stakeholders in this, like, so to the extent that landlords can be, helpful with that, I think, helps to kind of enhance and embrace that community, but it has to fall on open ears as well.
Yeah. Sounds like homework's critically important. Both of you sat through some rough presentations, it sounds like.
No.
Well, let me ask you another technology question. I'll go back, David, and I'll start with you. We've got mature companies on the call today. We've got startups on the call today. Wondering if you see, looking out into the future, any gaps in the market? Is there anything that you run into that you're just like, I wish someone would innovate in this space? I wish someone would solve for soap dispensers, or whatever else would be the next one. Like, is there anything that you can think of that's top of mind to the Durst organization that would be something, a technologist, that someone walked in the door with that innovation, be the kind of thing that you would say, you've got my attention?
Look, that's a really good question. So let me attempt to answer it in a couple of different ways. So first, I would say one of the things that I try to remind our teams about all the time is asking the following question: what do all large companies have in common? They all started out as small companies. No one starts out big, right? No one's born a grown-up, right? There's a process one has to go through. And so I want to make sure that in our company, right, we send the right signal, that we're rolling out the red carpet to tenants of all sizes, right? Customers of all sizes. We've had, over the years, companies grow with us from a couple of thousand square feet to tens of thousands of square feet, right? From one building to another building. To me, that's incredibly important, right? Long-term relationships, and recognizing that, the smaller companies also deserve that VIP treatment, right? And one of the perceptions sometimes that we have to fight against, right, is, you've got so many square feet, you're doing deals with companies that are taking hundreds of thousands of square feet. And yes, we are, right? And we actually just signed a lease with a law firm, two firms actually, TikTok, you may have heard of them, right? So that actually got done during the pandemic, one of the largest deals in New York City during the pandemic for a bunch of floors at one of our properties. And then another firm, a law firm, And that deal is about 70,000 square feet. And that deal originated and closed during the pandemic. So don't let the negative headlines persuade you. There's activity, leasing activity, and people are going to come back to the office. A topic for another time. So going back to your question, there's so much to unpack in that question, right? That I think, let me just start by, or I've already started, so I guess let me just elaborate a little bit further to say, what I see is some of the next big trends, big innovations that are on the horizon. So one of the biggest trends that I see, in our portfolio and certainly in New York City, has been to create truly inspiring places for people to work. Right? What's the purpose of work? Right? The purpose of work is productivity, is creativity, innovation, cohesion of employees, et cetera, right? There's a purpose, right? There's a reason why people come to the office, right? And I think going forward, especially given what we've just gone through, landlords like us have to give our customers a reason to come back, right? A reason to be here. So a number of things innovations that we've been pushing, over the last couple of years, for example, is converting rooftops and setbacks, which were an eyesore and no one wanted to be near historically, converting those into outdoor terraces. 34% of all space that we've leased in Midtown Manhattan on a square footage basis since 2016, right, is now associated with space that has a terrace. 34% of everything we've leased. So I see direct access to outdoor space as one of the next biggest trends in real estate, in commercial real estate. So on the residential side, I think that's been around a bit longer, but certainly the focus on access to the outdoors and recognizing a lot of the benefits, the biophilic benefits of being connected to the outdoors, really important. So I think that's a big shift. The amenitization, sort of the amenities arms race, right? More of this hospitality focus, which I know Daniel, you speak about a lot as well. We launched our own brand, Well And by Durst. We spent millions of dollars, not just on the brand, but on the experience to create, really a top-notch experience at our properties. Several of our commercial properties now have amenity floors and experiences with Michelin-rated chefs, food halls, meeting room space. We've programmed and curated programming, at our properties. We have beehives. We make our own honey. We actually allow tenants to suit up and learn about harvesting, honey. There's all sorts of really cool, programs that we've been doing, and technology is part of all of that. We've got like live bee cams, by the way, right? So yes, we've got beehives atop of a number of our buildings, but there's also, we're streaming live, right? We're streaming that into our amenity space so you can see the bees. So that sort of stuff just makes for a memorable and interesting experience, right? And I think that's going to be really important going forward. So is there one thing, right? Is there a silver bullet? Is there one thing? I don't think there's just one thing. I'm a big believer in hitting lots of singles and not just swing for the grand slam. So there's not one thing that I think will sort of move the needle. I think it's going to be a number of things that will move the needle, and that's everything from technology around energy efficiency, right, and reporting, which is technology that we're using in the portfolio, working with some great vendors on that front, to ice storage systems, right, which we have in a number of our buildings. We're actually the first in New York City at 1155 Avenue of the Americas, where we actually make ice at night when it's cheaper to do so and better for the environment. And we use that ice during the day to cool the buildings. So there'll be more those types of innovations continue to improve, some of these big breakthrough ideas that I think we'll see more of in the future. But there's not one thing. I think the takeaway is all of these things matter, and I think going forward, given how competitive the real estate environment has become, there's a need to differentiate the experience at the property level and at the portfolio level. So, our job is to create best in class experience for our customers. And so I think to the extent we can work with the entrepreneurs and innovators to do that, amen.
That sounds great. Daniel, you've gotten to sit in front of a lot of innovators and entrepreneurs at PropTech 360. Any trends or gaps in the market that really come top of mind to you in the real estate space?
Sure. Yeah, well, definitely. But it's funny because as David was speaking, I actually thought about back when I was an associate at a strategic consulting company, and it's all work, right? And so I just remember one day, the same thing over and over, and I leave my apartment, right? I get into a car, and so I'm like, okay, I leave one box, I get into another box, and then I get into the office and spend all day in another box. And then I go back into the car, and maybe if I'm lucky, I go into a restaurant, which is also a box. And then I get, and then I get back into the apartment or whatever. It's nighttime, and then I'm in another box. So it's just, it's very, given times have changed and everything, but it's being able to work in a building where you don't feel that you're boxed in all day, but that there is this experience, and that, with terraces, and you get the outside, and to be with a landlord that appreciates that, I think is very important for the individual and for the company, and in terms of productivity. So some areas that there's lots of areas that we see lots of innovation going on, but that's highly beneficial. I think that for us, right now, everything having to do with leasing, there's so many different platforms that are beneficial, right? Deposits and the whole leasing process, and the virtual tours, and delinquencies, and all of that stuff. And so I think that there's a lot of innovation going around there, and there's a lot of, it's like David said before, there's a lot of competition there, because I think there's a need to streamline it all. And one of the key things, I think one of the most important takeaways, is the companies that figure out how to have the most open API and the easiest to just deal with, and just say, hey, we're in here, within a matter of a day or two, and you can test this out or whatever. And it's not too cumbersome. I think that's kind of like a key takeaway that we've seen. So yeah, anything in the leasing space, I think that there's a lot of opportunity still. And then there's other areas. We deal with furnishing a lot, and there's some tech forward furniture companies. We don't do a lot of office. So I don't know if there's, what goes on in kind of like the co-working / suited office spaces, but everything having to deal with being light on furniture, and being able to simplify the logistics of putting furniture in and out. I think that there's an opportunity there.
Makes sense. Well, let me ask the question, and you hit on it earlier, David, and it was inevitable. It's one of these questions that was submitted early, was about the pandemic, and wondering if you'd share a little bit about what this year has been like through hopefully the only year of the pandemic for us, but definitely the first year of COVID, and wondering, how the post-pandemic planning is going for the Durst organization.
Yeah, another great, very timely question. So a couple of things. So one of the innovations we pursued just prior to the pandemic, which is really accelerating because of the pandemic, on sort of the co-working front, was creating this new brand and experience called Durst Ready, which is move-in ready, fully wired, furnished. For a company that wants to be in next week, you can be, in our portfolio next week, right? You're moving from Israel, right? You don't want to deal with the hassle of finding furniture, whatever it may be. You just want move in quickly and peace of mind. So we launched that initiative just over a year and change ago, so just prior to the pandemic. And what was interesting with the feedback that we've gotten was a couplefold. One is this particular product is different from, say, the traditional co-working or the flex operators that have shared space. And there's a few great operators out there. Convene does great work. We've invested in them, but they're about shared. Their flex space and co-working is about a shared experience. For Durst Ready, we focused on companies that want private, right? A private office, but they want the convenience. They want the relationship with the landlord. They still want to be within the larger community of the building and have access to programming in spaces that the landlord would put on. But at the end of the day, they have the company has a private office and branded experience, right? So what was interesting is we've seen a number of tenants, take long-term deals, actually pay a premium just because they didn't want to deal with the furniture. It's a pain in the rear end. They didn't want to spend months and months and lots of money, and found out that on a cost basis, once you factor in time and brain damage, it's actually a cost attractive option, right? Is to find move-in ready space, to actually focus on what the company's supposed to focus on, right? Not on designing and installing furniture. So that's one end of the spectrum, and then the other, there's been a lot of startups, or more of like the tech type of companies who maybe don't know what's happening, on the horizon. Maybe they're trying to raise a whole bunch of money and unsure of their future, and so they want to do a short-term deal, right? They want to be in quickly. They maybe want to do a 1-year term, 6 months, whatever it may be. And we're trying to accommodate those types of tenants as well. With our goal is the long-term relationship, right? Is to get those types of companies into the portfolio, and then have them grow with us over time. So certainly the pandemic has accelerated that trend, right? For flexibility for some of these types of tenants, not for everyone, but for a segment of the market for sure. In terms of the pandemic, you can imagine, right? The basic stuff, right? Operational changes have been, tons of operational changes, right? For limiting number of people in the elevator, to running our HVAC systems to the max, so we get more ventilation, into the buildings. Prior to the pandemic, we were already sort of, I'd say, best in class and ahead of what most folks were doing from a filter perspective, but all of our properties MERV 14 or greater, right? So we already were doing doing a lot on filtration. Those are just several examples, but certainly this last year, we had to be agile. Another core value, right, is to be agile and adjust, and we've had to adjust. The reality is, in our office portfolio, there has been, up until now, probably 10 to 15% of the population present. So, we had the opportunity to shift rather quickly without being sort of overwhelmed, because there just weren't a whole lot of people in New York City in the office towers coming in. That's starting to change. So I think we'll see some continued, innovations and tweaks, going forward.
We just had a question from the audience along those lines of, do you think that some landlords may have overreacted to the pandemic? We've all gotten used to work from home, and I think out of the three of us, David, you're the only one sitting in the office right now. Do you think that is a permanent state of being that's going to be part of work and that we all have to adjust to? Or do you see us coming back more to a new normal, or the old normal? How much do you think we change? Are landlords overreacting to the overall trends?
Yeah, I don't think we as a community, the landlord community and other stakeholders, have done a good enough job on the narrative and communicating the why, the purpose of the office. I have three boys, 15, 13, and 9. They've been hybrid learning. no one has suggested that my kids, or at least in the United States, that anyone's kids should be permanently distance learning for school. No one. No one's suggesting to save a few dollars and have all kids learn remotely. Why? In my opinion, the difference is people understand and appreciate the value, right, of in-person education, right? The socialization. It's just night and day, right? Very different experience for anyone who's got kids or nieces or nephews who've been doing the distance learning. Let's just say there's not a whole lot of learning going on, at least in my house, on the remote. There's some learning. It's not nothing, but it's subpar. In-person learning for school, right, is not going away. Yeah, maybe people learn together in person outdoors more. Maybe they learn together in person in some other ways, but still in-person learning for kids is not being questioned. So why is the same not, why the difference? Why the disconnect in the office place, right? There's a reason why office exists, right? Some of those reasons include, right, that spark, that aha moment, right, where you're talking with your colleagues, right, where you can mentor younger people, right, where you can network, where you have that collaboration, where you have the corporate cohesion, right, where really hard to create culture, right, when everyone's spread out all over the place. So, look, I don't have a magic ball. I have no idea. You might see some tweaks around the edges. Maybe people in the States, maybe you see people coming in 4 days a week, maybe longer, even those 4 days a week, and taking that one day that's more at home, and work life, home life balance is really important and a struggle now. So maybe you see like Spain just went in that direction with 4 and 3, 4 in and 3 sort of downtime. You may see some of that around the edges, which will be interesting. But the short answer is no. I do not see a big shift to working remotely permanently. I do agree with the comment that a number of landlords either overreacted or just haven't been sharing the science, haven't been sharing the academic research, haven't been sharing the evidence enough as to why there is an office space. And also, question, what are some of the motives for folks who are advocating, going remote? Just a number of these companies may be, in financial pain and sort of using that as an excuse to cut some costs. But I would just caution that, there is a cost to not being in the office as well, long term. Maybe in the short term, people can get by, but longer term, I think there's a real cost.
Sure. Just had another smart question come in, and it's around AI. So back on the investing and prop tech side, I've had a number of companies tell me that, like VCs tell me that if you come with a pitch that's not centered around AI, they're not interested. That's become the trend now. And so because of that, you have prop tech companies now inserting AI into their business plans, not necessarily building around it. How important do you see AI as a trend, Daniel? Maybe if you want to start, since you're in the prop tech 360 world, and then back to you, David, on the investment front. Do you see AI as a major center of focus in real estate? Obviously, it's changing a lot of areas of our lives, but do you see it coming to real estate in the near term, or is real estate still going to be more of a hesitant adopter of AI?
Right. Yeah, no, I mean, I think that I wouldn't call real estate a hesitant adopter. I think that there has been for years a mismatch between, like what's actually needed at the property and then AI. And then, you need to come up with the different definitions of what AI is, right? Because we use AI, all the time, and we don't necessarily, even realize it. But I see it, it's becoming more and more prominent, whether it's with, automated locks that gather information so that it can make your life easier in terms of when you're going to arrive, and everything from that to obviously the leasing process, and then just general communication, right? Like this event here, and our events and our communications are based in large part on AI, and so then it also plays into our communication with our tenants, and how are we communicating with them, and so we receive signals when things are good and bad, and if there's need for changes. So everything from the just day-to-day operations of locks and thermostats and so forth, to leasing, and then also marketing, communication. We have a community app that we use, and so while that's not considered like forward AI, it's still through those we're able to gain insights, which then are put into kind of like the AI funnel that allow us to respond. So I think that there's a lot of that going around. I also think that in office buildings, I mean, there's so many things that are automated nowadays that we don't realize. So I'm sure that at a larger scale with Durst buildings, there's a lot that goes on there. But those are some of the kind of like the micro trends that we're seeing, when it comes to AI in current operations.
Great. David, how about you? AI, is it a trend that's really coming to a real estate world near you or already here?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, I agree with Daniel. I don't have a whole lot more to add, other than agreeing with Daniel on this. I agree. There's been a lot of advancement in this area, and I think more to come, for sure, more to come. The only thing I would, a word of caution, is to Lucas, your point on, some tech companies may feel pressure to position themselves as being AI. We've seen, since the 90s, right? We've seen companies that aren't tech companies, right, claiming to be tech companies, right? And certainly that happened even more recently, where a lot of these flex operator companies position themselves as tech companies. They're not tech companies. Let's just be real, right? Just because you have an app doesn't make you a tech company, right? So I would say be true to yourself, right? The marketing, the spin, spin is spin, right? There's no one wants to greenwash. No one wants to sort of, put out something that is just not accurate, right? Or we shouldn't. Integrity matters, right? So yes, maybe a couple of deals get done because the buzzword's there. But at the end of the day, that burns the industry. It burns people who are truly doing the AI work, and someone's left holding the bag, right? So I would just be cautious of if you're not doing AI, right? If that's not your expertise, that's not the core of what your business is, just be true to who you are, right?
It's funny. So we actually, we were testing out. There are AI underwriting firms now, right? And so we tested out one of them. We were very curious to see, where that would pan out with our underwriting. And I think that one of our investment underwriters is on the call, so he'll probably remember that. But we gave them an address, and it was a building that we had just bought, and the estimated value using all of the AI systems and everything came up significantly higher than what we actually paid, right? So I think that there's still a lot of tweaking to do when it comes to a lot of this stuff, and I think that the flip side of that is there is cooperation on behalf of the landlord, and many, and I think that we want this stuff to work. It's just got to, it has to be accurate, and it has to be realistic with the market.
That's great. Well, down here to just a couple minutes left, I've got one more question, kind of an open-ended question that I'll leave to both of you. I'll start with you, Daniel. Talked about the hospitality being part of, a lot of asset classes now. I see it as a blending of asset classes where it's hard to tell a hotel from an apartment building nowadays in a lot of cases. So do you see that as a trend that's here to stay? Is that something that is a fundamental change to the way people are living and working and playing? Or, is this, again, just a trend that will come and go? So this would include co-living, co-working, all these concepts that are really changing up our traditional concepts of asset classes.
Sure. So, I mean, I think you need to break it down, right? So there's the overall real estate, and if there are hospitality type features, we can call it, that, are implemented within, whether it's residential or office or retail. And that I do think, definitely, that does exist. And I think that's a long-term trend, because I think it's just a shift in mind state, whereas it used to be much, real estate used to be much more about, just, okay, I have a building, pay your rent, and that's it, right? And now, because of a whole, shift in mentality and shift in technology and access and the ability for people to know what's going on in buildings and so forth, it's much more, things are much more transparent, which overall is a good thing. And so I think that there is a focus overall in, what are the cost-effective kind of services that you can put into a multifamily building or an office building or a retail store, and still be profitable, and at the same time better service your customers, which were once kind of not, I shouldn't say looked down upon, but it was a different relationship. Now I think it's much more of a partnership, and so you want to make that partnership successful to the extent that an owner is able to bring those services in a cost-effective way, which the key is making it cost-effective. How can you do that? And so I think that there is a willingness on the side of the owner to do that, and there's a desire to do it. And so, I think that is a long-term trend. When you get into the specifics, I think that it's niche specific. Sorry. So, right, when you have co-living, the way we view it, that's basically a very specialized development design, which there is a niche market for. I don't think that there's a huge scalable market for that. But there are certain factors that come in there to those specific co-living designs, and sure that hospitality will be important in there, to the same extent that we view that hospitality is important in traditional multifamily right now. And so that's what we're working on, is how do we implement the best of hospitality in a cost-effective, profitable way, but make the best experience for our residents. And so I think that will continue to all of the different sectors. I think co-working also, as David pointed out, there's the operators and some that have been focused on true hospitality in a profitable manner have done well. And then I think that also from the office owner standpoint, there has also been a mind shift in terms of, okay, how, everything that David spoke about in terms of, increasing the quality of the environment that you're working in and so forth. And so, yeah, I think that, in my view, that those are long-term trends that are going to continue. There will be little kind of fades are on the way, but I think that's a long-term thing.
So David, it's an evolution of asset classes as opposed to revolution of asset classes.
Yeah, absolutely, but an expeditious one, right? I agree 100% with Daniel. Hospitality mentality and focus is here to stay. Look, during the pandemic, we did over 330 virtual events in-house for our Durst community of customers, right? 330. Years ago, that would just been unheard of, right? It just would have been unheard of. So I agree with Daniel. I think you're going to see more and more of the hospitality focus, and also not only in all the ways Daniel said, which I completely agree with, but also at least for us, there's a recognition on the importance of going. We always went above and beyond, but now we have to go above and beyond in a different way for our customer, and that is also creating a community within our portfolio. Right? If we have 50,000 people that live and work in our portfolio, really important that we're also supporting our customers, supporting our tenants and residents by, where appropriate, even introducing them to each other, right? And that matters, right? So if you're a tech company and you want exposure to some of the VCs, your VC private equity, and you want exposure to some of the tech folks, right? We're putting on events now, right, where people can come together in the portfolio. We did this thing called Durst Talks, where you get the CEOs of companies to other executives coming in to talk about what they're doing. And we open it up to everyone in the portfolio. It's really fascinating, right? You have sort of this organic, sort of interaction amongst sort of the customers, if you will. We have lots of digital assets, Times Square, right? Big, massive billboards in Times Square. We have digital screens in all of our elevator cabs, right? We have the ability to not only introduce our tenants, but where appropriate to do some I'll call it marketing, right? But more, not in your face, advertising marketing, but more of a kindred spirit sort of thing, right? So creating that community, between retail and office, and vice versa, residential to commercial, commercial to residential, you'll see a lot of that being packaged, I think, going forward in this hospitality sort of customer first lens.
Great. Well, I want to be respectful of everyone's time. Thank you very much, David Neal, Daniel Farber, for the time today. And Avia, I don't know if you have anything you want to wrap us up with, but definitely appreciate everyone's time and great questions from the audience.
Yes, and I think that was a very insightful discussion. Thank you, David, for joining us today. It was very interesting for me on a personal level, also listening to all the great stuff that you guys have been working on and will work on. I'm looking forward to come to one of your buildings and maybe have my office there. Thank you, Daniel. And thank you, Lucas, for being a great host. Thank you for HLC for hosting this as always. And yeah, we look forward to seeing you next time live in Israel, hopefully.
Look forward to it.